So you've decided to take your first steps into building your own EDH commander deck. Now, I guess there's no other way to do this but then to just, well, let's just do it. So first thing we need to do is pick a commander. Now, if you've not picked a commander yet, I have a video on how I think the best way to do that is. So that's links down in description. So yeah, pause this, go watch that, pick a commander. It needs to be a legendary creature, and that can be your commander for your deck. Awesome stuff. Once you've picked your commander, welcome back. We now need to work out the color identity of your commander. So in the top right hand corner of your card, your Magic the Gathering card, you have its casting cost. And that will have some certain mana symbols, whether that's white and blue, red, green, blue, black, red, or Wooburg, or whatever it is. The casting cost in the top right has all those mana symbols, and the color identity of that card is equal to all the mana symbols. So if it has Wooburg, you have the color identity of all the colors. If it's just blue, it's mono blue. If it's white and blue, it's Azorius, red, green, white, Naya, black, red, blue, Grixis, etc., etc., etc. Then basically we know now that all the cards you can play within the 99 of your deck can be of those colours or a combination of those colours. Yeah. The other thing you need to take into account is if your commander is a partner or partner with or friends forever or a doctor's companion or a background, because then you can essentially have two commanders or two commander cards within the command zone, and the color identity of both of those cards then apply together. We see this a lot in like CDH, where somebody maybe is running Thrasio Bruise. So they have basically got a Sans black deck because Bruise is red and white and Thrasios is green and blue. The other thing we need to take into account as well is if there's any abilities in the text box with mana symbols. So it's not just the mana symbols in the top right, it's also the mana symbols in the text box. So if we take somebody like Kenrith or Najila, they might have a white or a red symbol in the top right, but within their text box, they have a whole bunch of mana symbols for each of the other colours, making them a Wooburg commander. So yeah, now we know the commander color identity of your commander, we can now start picking cards for your deck. So with what, 24,000, 25,000 cards to pick from, where do you start? Well, I guess we'll start with the lands because, that's pretty simple for our first deck. When it comes to lands, I recommend running a full 37 lands. This is just to ensure we are hitting our 5th land drop on turn 5, and to also make sure with our ramp we're hitting 6 mana turn 6, 7 mana turn 7, if not before, to make sure we can start to double spell in the late game, cast our commander, maybe recast it if it's died, and making sure we don't fall behind. The combination of lands that you want to be running is going to be a mix of dual coloured lands, basic lands, and utility lands. The utility lands will heavily depend on your commander deck and your strategy and what you are trying to do. You might be wanting to run things like Rogue's Passage, Mage of Ith, if you care about like combat and things like that. You might want to run things like Scavenging Grounds if you know your opponents are doing certain things with their lands. Reliquary Tower if you're drawing lots of cards. So utility is heavily dependent on your commander, your deck, and your strategy. Basic lands, I recommend running at least 3 basic lands for each colour within your deck. So if you're playing a 3-colour deck, that's 9 lands, 3 of each colour. If you're in a dual-colour deck, 2-colour deck, then obviously you'll probably be running more basics because there's less dual lands that you want to be playing. And the dual lands, I would avoid the tap ones and try and play as many untapped ones. So in Commander, we have lands that enter untapped if you have 2 or more opponents. We do have 2 or more opponents. It's a multiplayer game. We have the slow lands, which enter the battlefield untapped if you control 2 or more lands. Obviously, we're all playing ramp here and there, so chances are we're probably going to have 2 or more lands, so they're a good pickup. The bounce lands can tap for 2, but just remember they come into play tapped, and they will bounce 1 back. So if you don't mind that tempo play, then that's great, you can use them. Other dual-coloured lands which are pretty good, or I like, are the Surveil lands and the Scry lands. So the temples, the Scry lands, they come in tapped, but they scry 1, so you can look at the top card. If you don't want it, you can put it on the bottom, so you can set up your next draw. Same with the Surveil lands. They also have the land types on them, so if you ever get to the point of upgrading to fetch lands and things like that, then you can start to fetch those with that, which is pretty good. So yeah, that's the lands. Just try and make sure your mana base covers the amount of colours within your deck, I'm going to give you a formula for that at the end, but if you're using things like Archideck, Moxfield, they will have a breakdown of all the colour of cards in your deck and the colour of the mana symbols in your lands, and be able to tell you what your ratio is, so you make sure you've got enough mana of each colour to regularly cast those spells. So yeah, but more about that formula at the end. Next up, ramp. Now when it comes to ramp, we want to be running at least 10 sources. So this is 10 ways in which we can get more mana on the battlefield so we can cast spells a turn early. This could be a combination of mana dorks, artifacts, and like ritual spells, or could just be all artifacts or all mana dorks, depending on our deck's strategy and what it's trying to do and what our commander wants. So, mana dorks. Green has mana dorks that tap, add green mana. Blue has mana dorks that tap and add mana to cast non-creature spells like artifacts or instant sorceries. Red has a couple of rituals, so you'll pay X amount to cast a spell and then it will generate more mana than what you put into, something like Seed and Song. They also have a few payoffs with cards that when you cast a spell it will generate a mana for you, such as Bergie and Stormkiln Artist. What's that? That was green, blue, and red. Black will have rituals as well. So something like Dark Ritual, you'll pay 1 mana, it'll generate 3 mana. You obviously just remember with rituals, when it puts the mana into your mana pool, you need to use it straight away, you can't save it. And then white has catch-up ramp. So you would have your like Weathered Wayfarer, I believe it is. It's a 1 mana drop, and then you can pay 1 mana, tap it, and if an opponent has more lands than you, you can fetch an extra land. So you're always keeping up with your opponents. You're never really truly getting ahead. And yes, so that's the mana dorks for each colour. When it comes to artifacts, my go-to obviously is running a Soul Ring. I tend to run the 3 Signets and the 3 Talismans, so that puts me at 7 sources straight away before I even really get too much into it. That's obviously based on a 3-colour deck. Obviously, if you're running a 2-colour deck, you have to run less. From there, you can add on things like your Mind Stone, your Felwar Stone, your Thought Vessel, and so that gets you up to the 10 pretty easy. And then other ones that you could run, if you wanted to run into really ramp into really big stuff towards the late game, you could be looking at, I believe it's the Gilded Lotus, the Thran Dynamo. There's a couple of like 4 drops that tap for 2, Worn Power Stone, and things like that. So depending on what we want to ramp into, depends on where we want to put our ramp. So obviously green is the known colour for ramping with the namesake card Rampant Growth. And if you're playing green and your commander costs 4, you're going to run probably a lot of 2-drop ramp. So on turn 1 you play a land drop, turn 2 you play a land drop, turn 2 you tap, cast a ramp spell, so you get an extra land onto the battlefield. So on turn 3 you're untapping with 3 mana, playing your 4th land, casting your 4-drop a turn early. So just think about what you're ramping into as well. And then obviously depending on what colours you're playing and depending on what spells you have available. So yeah, that's it. 10 sources of ramp, that's a good starting point. If you have a really high costed card, like I have a Gishath deck, or had a Gishath deck, I changed it to Sakama. I put loads of ramp in that because it's an 8 mana commander, but I was able to cast my commander quite consistently on turn 5 because of the amount of ramp that I had in my deck. So I'll put a link to that one in the description as well if you want to learn more about ramp within that deck. So yeah, that's ramp. Make sure you're getting enough of it on the battlefield to make sure you can keep up with the game, and if your stuff dies, you've got enough mana to be able to redeploy onto the battlefield or recast your commander, paying the commander tax. So yeah. Next up, card draw. Now when it comes to card draw, we need 2 types of card draw. We need repeatable card draw and impulsive card draw. Now repeatable card draw are permanents on the battlefield that when you complete a game action, you are going to draw a card. So we're looking at things like Shurikai Genesis Engine, Esper Sentinels, Mystic Room, or Heuristic Study. Those 3 are quite expensive. But they're big heavy hitters and they hold a price tag for a reason. Other things you want to look at is like Guardian Project, Beast Whisperer, like Sithis Harvest Hands. Whenever you complete a certain game action, you're going to draw a card. Obviously, depending on what type of deck you're running, depends on which ones of these are beneficial for you, not just in terms of colour, but also the strategy. We then have Impulsive Card Draw. Red does this quite a lot with maybe like discard a card, draw 2 cards. They have quite a few cards that do that, instant sorcery speed. They also have a lot of exile, so exile the top card of your library or the top 2 cards of your library. You can play that card this turn or until the end of your next turn. Black has it through loss of life, so you're going to lose life, draw 2 cards, maybe lose 2 life, draw 2 cards, lose 3 life, draw 3 cards. So yeah, and so that's that way. Blue does it through instance of sorcery spells, Chemist's Insight, stuff like that. You're going to draw 2 cards when you cast this spell, Divination. Don't run Divination. Stuff like they have like a lot of big X spells like Blue Zenith, stuff like that allow you to draw lots of cards quite quickly. So yeah, we want to be running at least 10 sources, but I would say more. If you can get more sources of card draw into your deck, the better. The more cards you draw into, the more likely you are to find an answer to what your opponent's doing, and the more likely you are to find something to enable your game plan to move forward to be able to win the game. One thing we need to look at as well with card draw is things like our artifacts. If we're running a command sphere and a mind stone, they also have card draw abilities on them. Just remember to tap your command sphere full mana before you sacrifice it to draw a card, so then you're floating mana in case you get an instant speed source that you can then cast with that mana you've just floated. Mind stone, remember, you can't tap itself to then sacrifice it because you have to tap something else to generate the mana to tap the mind stone to sack it to draw a card. So yeah, that's ways of getting ramp and card draw into your deck within just one card. So yeah, card draw, 10 sources minimum, more if you can, repeatable and impulsive. Removal. Now, when it comes to removal, we want to be running a whole range of things that can hit everything from artifacts, enchantments, creatures, and permanents. 8 sources of removal is what I recommend. If you're using counter spells, I would count them within this section as well. Just be careful as a new player when playing counter spells, because you need to learn when to leave mana open versus when not to leave mana open, and also what threats are okay to hit the board versus what threats are not okay to hit the board. So that's something you will learn as you go on. I'm not saying don't play with them, but just remember there's a bit of a learning curve to them, and it could be quite steep, and everybody's threat set is different, so you have to judge it on your own threat assessment on what is going to affect your board state, not your opponent's. Now, deal with opponents. Generous Gift, Beast Within. Great spells to deal with any permanent, whether it's lands, artifacts, enchantments, etc. Awesome stuff. Good removal for creatures. We've got Path to Exile. We've got Swords to Plowshare, Pongify, Rapidization. I quite like Cut Down. Long Goodbye, which was just printed, which has the text on it can't be countered, which is great for getting around ward. Such as things like Void Rend also gets around ward, can't be countered. Red has a lot of direct damage. Green has a lot of great ways of dealing with artifacts and enchantments, such as like Return to Nature, Naturalize, stuff like that. Green also has a lot of bite and fight spells, so your creature fights an opponent creature or deals damage equal to its power to target creature. So yeah, depending on what your deck strategy is, depends on which ones you want to use. Just make sure you've got a range of hitting stuff. Also make sure you've probably got a few exile effects in there as well, not just destroy. This is great for when you're playing against people who have graveyard based decks and they are wanting to constantly get stuff in their graveyard to get it back to get more value. You don't want to be helping them fill it up, so you want to be using things like maybe like a Resculpt and a Raven Form, stuff like that. I believe they exile, which is also great for getting rid of things like the One Ring, which is indestructible. So yeah, whole range of removal, tailor it to your needs. Try and focus on instant speed stuff so you can cast it when you need to at the right point, not on your turn. Okay, awesome stuff. 8 slots, removal, try and cover all bases. Board wipes. Now when it comes to board wipes, I recommend running 5. Which might seem a lot. A lot of advice over the last few years has to be running less and less board wipes. Now I think we're getting to a point when you've got 3 opponents and everybody's deploying threats. 1 for 1 in each opponent, you spending 3 cards to destroy 1 thing from each of your opponents is not so good. People are getting a bit more savvy with that, so run more board wipes. If you can get rid of all 3 of your opponent's stuff with 1 card, that's a lot better. Loads of board wipes in white. So go through and find the best ones that line up with your deck. White has a bunch of modal ones as well. We can choose multiple modes, so you can exile all artifacts, enchantments, creatures, austere commands, something like that. Sunfall, which is a new one which has been printed, which is great because it exiles everything, so it stops people from getting things back. Red has Blasphemous Act, probably one of the better board wipes in the game because it costs sometimes just 1 mana because it's less for each creature on the battlefield. Same with Vanquish the Horde, another white one. Blue has Curse of the Swine Flu. Black has Toxic Deluge, Ritual of stuff like that. So yeah, 5 board wipes. If you are finding that you're sitting in a game and you're not casting them, or you're sat with 1 or 2 in your hand, then swap them out for some targeted removal to remove those threats individually as they pop up on the board. But to start off with, I would suggest 5. So this is the big section. This is going to be 30 cards of your deck, okay? This is your synergy. This is your deck. This is the core, the foundation. This is the base plate. This is what your deck does, okay? I don't know what your deck does. I don't know what your commander is. So depending on what your deck does and what your commander is, depends on what is going to go in here. So I'm just going to loosely throw out a few examples. Enchantress base deck. This is where you want to have your enchantments and any payoffs for playing those enchantments. Voltron deck. This is where your creatures are going to go and your equipment are going to go for equipping those creatures to be able to attack. Mono green stompy, big stompy creatures, then also cards to make those creatures really big to stomp over your opponents. Yeah, same with white weenies, lots of little white creatures all working together, ways to pump them, make them big, indestructible, so you can deal with your opponents and win the game. So yeah, so this is this section. This is all the stuff that makes your deck your deck. What I would also include in this section is your winning strategy, your win con, so to speak. So if you're playing a lot of big green stompy creatures, maybe you want to be running like an Overwhelming Stampede, an Overrun, or even something like a Triumph of the Horde, so that you can make sure you can get that damage through to win the game. No point in having 20 creatures on the battlefield if you can't do anything with them. Yeah? Same with like spell slingers. You want to be making sure you've got a lot of like instant speed spells so you can cast them consistently. Maybe you've got like a Bergie, a Stormkill Artist, Gutter Snipe, stuff like that. So when you're casting stuff, you're gaining value from constantly casting those cards. Awesome stuff. The other thing I would include within this section is an I win button. Now, this is not to everybody's taste, but it's something that I like to do within my decks. I like to have a way of putting something on the table that says, if you do not respond to this, I will win. And this is something you can play once the game's been going on for over an hour, or you're on turn 10 or something like that. And it's like, oh my god, this is such a stalemate. I need to get something out. This could be like a Simic's Ascendancy if you're in a ++1 counter deck. It could be Approach of the Second Sun if you're playing white. It could be a infinite combo. Just be careful with infinite combos, because it needs to be an infinite combo with a plan. I'm going to deploy this, make infinite mana or take infinite turns, and then I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. It needs to be clean cut and know what you're doing. If you go infinite and then don't have a game plan, people will be like, what are you doing? Yeah, you've got to have a plan. Yeah, if you're going with infinites, you've got to have a plan. So just maybe stick with the normal I win ones or the big plays. Like something like if you're playing Black, Torment of Hellfire. Yeah, you've got to turn 12, you've ramped a bit, you've got 14 mana available, Torment of Hellfire for 12 mana. Boom. Like if it doesn't win you the game on the spot, it's going to put you in a commanding position to be able to win the game. Okay? Cards like that I think are advantageous. Maybe just run one of them, maybe two of them, depending on your deck, and depending on your meta and your pods in which you play at. But yeah, you don't want to be sat on a board or in a game with a board state that's all gummed up and jammed up. Nobody's playing board wipes because they don't want to lose their own stuff, you know, and it's just like you've been sat there for an hour and a half and there's no win con. Yeah? Try and have an I win button in the back of your deck, and then you can deploy it if you need to deploy it. It's like a break in case of emergency type thing. So, we've outlined each section. Where do we find the cards for each of these sections? Well, you're a Magic the Gathering player. You gather with people to play Magic. Ask them. Yeah, you'll see people's decks. You'll ask their opinions on cards. Maybe they have like a Blink deck if you're building a Blink deck. Maybe they have a Voltron deck, and you can have a look through and you can see, and you can start to familiarize yourself with some of those cards that you might want to put in your deck or have put in your deck. We can then go through websites such as Scryfall, EDHREC, and we can have a look for specific cards. Just remember with EDHREC, it's going to take the generic information of the most popular stuff that it's found online. So if you're building a commander that's normally a +1/+1 counter commander and you're building it as a Voltron commander, just remember to tweak the advanced filters. So you want to be putting like your commander with these cards without these cards. So that will hone in synergies that might be more based around what you're doing. Maybe your theme is so niche that it's not giving you any hits. So that's when we'd use something like Scryfall. And we're going to use Scryfall to search for those niche cards effects that you're looking for. We use that through the Oracle text, so O:\speech bubbles. Take 5 minutes to learn some of the syntax in Scryfall. It will make finding cards so much better. I did it with my Tavasa deck when I wanted to search for cards which had protection from creatures that were specifically enchantment and auras in Bant colours. And that helped me to really narrow down everything I needed. So yeah, we can also use Oracle tags, so O-tag. So this is great if you're running for a particular theme. Maybe you're looking for Blink, so you can do O-tag::Blink. Yeah, so just spend some time on Scryfall, learning some of the search syntax. It can be a bit of a mind F when you're first learning it, but just take 5 minutes, go through it, and it will really help you start to build decks. And yeah, EDHREC, just always use the advanced search filters. Never search on EDHREC without those advanced filters on to tweak into what you want. So yeah, So ask people at your local game store, ask game store owners, look through other people's decks, look through other people's decks on Moxfield, on Archidect, you know, and then EDH Rec and Scryfall. Loads of places to find cards, see cards. I would recommend Reddit, but it can be a bit of a hellhole sometimes. So just, yeah, take everything with a pinch of salt, use your own independent thought, make your decisions, and then that's how you can start to find your cards to start building all of the categories within your deck. You built your deck, it's time to playtest it. Before you press buy, playtest your deck, please. And I'm not talking about playtest it half a dozen times, I'm talking about playtesting it 10, 20 times. Really go through that deck, really playtest it. I don't go a week where I don't get my decks out and goldfish each of my decks. Or at least the 4 decks I'm maybe going to play at the local game store the next week. I goldfish my decks every week. It makes sure I know my lines, it makes sure I know what cards are in my decks, so I know that if I'm digging for an answer, I know that I've got an answer to deal with that, and I'm not wasting people's time digging for something that doesn't exist. Right, so playtesting. Things we're looking for when we're playtesting. We want to make sure that we can cast all of our spells. Moxfield and Architect are great at this because it'll give you a readout. It'll be like 10% of your deck is red, blue, and green. So then you can go, right, look at my mana base. Yeah, I've got 12% of my mana, which is red, and 12% which is green, and 12% is blue. So I know that all my lands can tap for those spells, and I'm going to consistently have enough mana of those colours to be able to cast those spells. If it's saying, oh, you've got 10% of your cards in your deck are white, but you've only got 8% of your deck is lands is white, then you're like, okay, I'm going to struggle to cast some of these. Do I need to add more white into my mana pool, into my land base, or do I need to reduce some of the white pips in my deck? Yeah, so this is where you start looking at things like, have you got triple coloured pipped cards in your deck? Those are easily to cast in monocoloured decks, maybe 2-colour decks, but in 3-colour decks they start to get a bit more tricky. Okay, so this is all stuff that we can see in playtesting. Yeah, when you're playtesting, what I mean is like goldfishing. So you're going to pull your deck up on Moxfield or whatever, and you're going to play a land, draw a card, play a land. Yeah, can you cast anything? No. Turn 2, draw a card. Can you do anything? Play a land, tap 2 mana, cast your signet, your talisman. Okay, turn 3, draw a card, play a land. Maybe it's cast your commander because it's 4 mana. Yeah, you're going to play through this, and you're going to do it all the way until turn 6, turn 7. Yeah, and if you get to turn 6 to turn 7 and you've got nothing on the board and you're like, I do not present myself as a threat in any way, shape or form, then maybe you need to reevaluate, or maybe just go, okay, that was maybe just not a good start, maybe not a good mulligan. So then you can restart the game, do it again, do it again, do it again. You'll learn to mulligan better, you'll learn your lines in your deck, and you'll learn what cards you can cast, what cards you can't cast. You want to look at the bell curve of your deck, the mana curve. Like maybe you've got loads of 7 and 8 drops, and your ramp package is not enough to deal with those 7 and 8 drops. Maybe you're like, well, I've got 10 sources of ramp, but I've got 3 8 drops and 2 9 drops. So maybe it's like, actually, I need to go up to 14 pieces of ramp, 16 pieces of ramp to make sure I can cast those cards, because by the time I get to turn 9, I've got nothing on the battlefield and I'm probably dead from 3 opponents. Yeah, playtesting your deck is critical, so critical. It's where we can start fine-tuning things, tweaking things. And if we can do that before we buy our cards, it will save you a lot of money. So we're nearly there, guys. Relax. Rome wasn't built in a day, okay? We just need to do the last double check. So we're double checking the color identity of all the cards in our deck. So we're looking at those mana symbols in the top right corner as well as the mana symbols in the card box, the abilities and things that you have on your cards. So just make sure they all align up with your color identity of your commander or commanders. Yeah? Awesome stuff. Once that's all done and sorted, you can hit buy. We can make sure everything's all in place. Make sure you get some sleeves as well while you're doing this. If it comes to between buying sleeves and a playmat, you might see that really nice fancy playmat. Buy the sleeves. Protect your cards first over the table, please. Most local game stores will have a playmat that they can give out to you as you're sat playing, and then just give it back to them at the end of the day. So yeah, sleeves, deck, awesome, you're good to go. When you get it at home, shuffle it up, get it sleeved up, shuffle it up, get used to shuffling 100 cards. It can be quite clunky sometimes when you're first doing it, especially if you're used to 60 card formats, or maybe you're just new to the game. Yeah, and then get down to that local game store and start playing some games. Remember, there is variance in Commander. There is variance in a singleton format. You're drawing cards from a randomly assorted list. Like, not every game is going to go perfect, so don't be disheartened if the first game or the first couple of games you play with your deck don't go the way you want, yeah? Like, over time, 10 games, 20 games, 30 games, you'll start to see. You'll get more comfortable with the deck, how it operates. This is why we playtest so much, yeah? So don't be disheartened if it doesn't win on the first game. I remember when I first started playing Commander, I didn't think I won a game for about the first month or so. And I remember my first win and I was ecstatic, absolutely ecstatic. I was like, yes, I actually won a game, you know, it's just crazy. So yeah, take your time, go play some games, enjoy it. Remember as well that Commander is an evolving thing. There's always new cards being printed. There's always new stuff. You can tweak your deck. You can change your deck cards in and out here. It's a trading card game. Remember to take your trades with you to local game stores and trade more. Yeah, absolutely fantastic stuff. If you guys can let me know what you built, I would love to know, like any sweet combos or niche little interactions you put in there. Share them. Let everybody know so people can find these nice cards that you've found. Awesome stuff. Like, comment, subscribe if you can. That would absolutely be amazing. I've seen lots of people once again sharing my content. Love you guys. Appreciate it. And yeah, I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye for now.